finally, most people want to understand what is happening with their body, because without that, the motivation will not come. And then they need to understand, okay, now so what? You have told me what my biological age is, so what? So that's exactly what we do with our reports. We give the biological age, we give insights into health in terms of organ health scores, and then we come into recommendations.
We live in an age of data, yet our most important asset, our health, is often measured with the tools of the past. We wait for red flags and warning signs, but what if we could measure our vitality in real time? What if we could know our biological age and use that knowledge to design a healthier, longer future? Our guest today, Deepankar Nayak, is a futurist who is building that reality right now. As the CEO of Deep Longevity, he is creating the AI-powered tools that could soon become the new global standard for measuring health. This isn't just about adding years to life, it's about reforming our entire approach to wellness, one line of code at a time.
Okay, my pleasure to introduce Deepankar Nayak. Deep, for those who are his friends, to consider myself among them. So I'm going to refer to Deep, the CEO of Deep Longevity, a trailblazing AI health tech company, redefining the measurement of aging. And now with nearly 2 decades of global experience in artificial intelligence and software as a service and life sciences, Deep, his background in engineering and as an MBA, combines technological foresight with philosophical depth. Educated at IIT Roorkee and IIM Calcutta, he now leads the development of AI-powered biological aging clocks that span blood, epigenetic, psychological, and microbiomic dimensions. His approach goes beyond diagnostics. It's a strategy for longevity transformation. And so, known for his transparency and global outlook, Deep embodies the next wave of health innovation, distributed, personalized, and deeply human. So, Deep, my friend, welcome to the DNA of Things.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, and thank you for that wonderfully kind introduction. Delighted to be at the DNA of Things.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And we met digitally. I think I met you as let's say several, maybe saying many truth seekers might have met you. So digitally, searching for longevity models and trying to understand where the industry was. And I think I reached out and was connected with you probably a year ago so now. And, I think since our conversation really picked up in the last month or so, we've realized there's a lot of synergies in the industry, whether it's, technical from a wet lab or dry lab perspective, but even from a, thought leadership and knowledge contribution. And so really delighted to be hosting you today and getting a sense of, these models that you've developed, where did they come from? How did you come with these ideas? And again, you've been working on this for some time. This isn't something that you've stumbled onto recently. And so, I'd really like to understand, Deep, is, you've worked across continents and industries. And so now here you are in aging and health span. So I'd love to, learn the personal stories of what drew you in to this space, decades ago.
Yeah, Jeremy, thanks for the question. So I think my background has been around technology, and I've done a lot of work in the life sciences industry. So I've been always very closely associated with health and wellness, and I've seen the good that the industry can do. And for me, the biggest driver has been how technology can play a role in terms of improving lives. And I've done that successfully many times in my life, working with large enterprises. Whether you are trying to improve productivity, or you are helping organizations become more compliant, or you are easing customer-facing processes, and all of these with technology is suddenly very amazing. Now, I've always been very enthusiastic about health and wellness, I would prioritize my activities, my sports, my workouts. I would always keep an eye out for my diet and things like that. So I was sort of on top of health and wellness in my thought process when I was actually working out in the gym, and I remember it very clearly. That whole week when I started listening to the podcast by David Sinclair on lifespan, it was very interesting. And then I read the book, and then for me it was like, this is for me. This is something that we should be doing. When I looked into longevity, the field was like really coming up at the stage. Right? The concept of aging clocks was beginning to formulate primarily in academic circles. And there we identified a niche where technology can play a huge role in terms of bringing value and disrupting the way things are being done today. And it was something that you can also build without making huge investments into wet labs or recruiting a ton of subjects and things like that. So that's what I brought to the fore. Right, I brought my passion around health and wellness and making lives better, my deep understanding of technology, and then looking at the opportunity which the rising field of longevity offered. We thought we could create a wonderful diagnostic tool in the form of aging clocks. I believe you were the first in the industry who sort of started talking about aging clocks. And we have been deliberately slow in our approach, right? We have taken our time to build our models. We wrote our papers. We got the publications. We filed for patents. We got patents registered. We were in stealth mode for quite a while, and then we had all of this under our belt. That's when we came to the market with our products.
Amazing. And what's interesting from your perspective is, or from my perspective, when I have a conversation with you, when I think about my, let's just say my academic experience, I found the best projects most insightful, the most exciting, and then potentially even paradigm shifting insights came from like interdisciplinary teams, right? So although I was working in a space of, say metagenomics at the time, which was, really trying to elucidate the DNA of life, as nebulous as that sounds. And so it was that required multiple people coming to the table. So people with, wet lab experience, people with statistical analysis capabilities, people who could build the software, great writers, great visual designers, because ultimately you got to communicate and convey these things. And so, when I speak with you and I hear you and I understand your background, I understand, your perspective as an engineer, as a builder, as a systems thinker, probably. And then from an MBA point of view is like, okay, well, how do we create value in the marketplace? And, value as defined, I think most simply by, if we're trying to serve somebody who's in the market, I mean, it's not so much the product per se, it's the process that your product, which I like to think of it, more so as a service, like how that helps that person become amazing. So, ultimately, I think we're all trying to become, better versions of ourselves, better equipped for some certain thing, whether that's, raising your children, whether that's being an entrepreneur, whether that's being an athlete, whether that's being an airline pilot, an astronaut, whichever. But certainly, in all cases, your body is your vehicle, right? And so when I hear you say, something like longevity lifespan from Sinclair, David Sinclair, and there's lifespan, there's health span, and there's longevity. Maybe just for coming to terms to start with, I'm wondering how you think about those terms, and and then we can kind of talk about like, okay, well, what is it that we're actually measuring when we talk about, say, an age clock, and why does that even matter? And well, I mean, you're preaching to the choir, so I think I already know, but just first, I'd like to understand, how you reconcile or think differently about those terms, because hear them often used interchangeably. So longevity, health span, and lifespan, and where do you go to, and what do those terms mean to you?
Yes, that's so. quite a few thoughts in my head, so I'll try and structure them, and feel free to cut me short if I'm rambling on too much. So for me, health span has been always very important, right? And I think it is for almost everyone, right? When you are living and you are alive, and as long as you live, everyone wants to be healthy and live life to the fullest. Life is beautiful, and we should all aspire to be healthy. So, and if you do, and if you are taking care of yourself, and if you are keeping a disease away, and if you are eating well and exercising and sleeping well, and doing all of those things, which most of us know, but many of us don't follow through and don't do, you will invariably live longer. You are keeping inflammation away, you are keeping pathogens away, you would live longer. That intrinsically hasn't been my driver. My driver hasn't been that I have to live a very long life. I believe that it's equally important that you live life with a sense of purpose. We are here on this planet for a reason, and we should try to find it. And if you do that, or even if you're on the path towards that, then you find life to be amazing, and you'll have your curiosity about life, and you'd be a lifelong learner, and that philosophy would sort of drive multiple good things in your overall approach to life. But in pursuit of this, what we realized is now we have all the relevant tools which makes it possible for you to extend this vision to millions of people. Through the use of technology and through AI, you are able to create a diagnostic, a measure called aging clock, which then is made available to everyone through the web. What the aging clock is essentially is it's a summary of your health. Now there are different aging clocks that uses different data types. In deep longevity, we use blood reports, blood biomarkers for our blood age clock. We have an epigenetic clock that uses DNA methylation. And then we also have a patent on a microbiome clock, which uses microbiome data. And each one of these predicts the overall health of your body based on that particular data type, right? So it is entirely possible that you have someone who has different organ systems which have different levels of health, right? The body being interconnected, if you are able to optimize a set of organ systems, it will reflect on the overall body, and your overall body and your health will improve. We think that knowing this is as important as telling people like what their cholesterol is or what their glucose measures is, and these are usually triggers which makes people aware that okay, my health is not optimum, I have to do something about it, go see a physician, etc., etc. Be aware. So the aging clock and knowing your biological age, we think, is that amazing statistical nudge which tells people that this is where I am with respect to all my peers. I am 40-year-old, I'm doing great, I'm taking care of my health. I can see my blood work resembles a 35-year-old. So I should continue doing what I am doing. And vice versa. And if it is not, then I should be really, thinking about and taking my health seriously, and doing some research or talking to physicians and finding out what can I do to improve myself. So this is actually the sense of deep longevity. This is what aging clocks do. And what we have done very successfully is made this technology and package this technology in a very neat manner that can be made available to people all over the world in a very easy and inexpensive manner.
Yeah, I love the roll up, right? So one of the things I was thinking about is imagine where the T4 model car was when it first became available to the masses. And I'm not sure that there was even a gas gauge on that. Probably not. So, I mean, how would you know when you were going to run out of gas? I think, yeah, was there an odometer? I don't know. I'd have to double check, but I'm guessing the basic level, probably not. You just kind of had to know by feel, probably trial and error, if you will. Now you fast forward and you look at like, so there's Henry Ford. Now you look at like, say, Elon Musk and Tesla, right? And to the extent that, that operating system, the digital metrics therein, I mean, you're downloading, upgrades from the satellite now in terms of all the different, diagnostics and software upgrades to understand the hardware, so to speak. And here we are in the last, let's just call it for the sake of argument, last 100 years, how much we've learned about ourselves, our genomes, for example, our, obviously our blood analysis. And, you talked about microbiomes, talk about epigenetics. And, we're at this point now, well, you plug in, big data, population studies, precision health, and then, you've got this kind of information architecture that is, in many ways was probably centralized and was forming by design. If you think about research institutions, for example, or hospitals, et cetera. But now there's this, kind of decentralized, kind of organic self-assembly that's happening also. And so you're starting to see how, like you said, compared to your peers, right? So yes, it's compared to your peers, but then it's also comparing to the different versions of you, right? So my molecular clock at 40 is going to be different than 20, but maybe is that what I want to be tracking toward if I was to break it down simply as like a roll-up metric? And obviously it's not this simple at this point, but maybe that's where we're getting to is, well, speaking in terms of, economics, how a CFO looks at the balance sheet is what's P&L, right? Like, so what's profit, what's loss, right? And, what are my assets and what are my liabilities, et cetera? And I kind of look at this opportunity as, well, this could be my roll-up metric, which is what is my biological age versus my chronological age, right? And so then how might we break that down insofar as, okay, there's input from blood, there's input from epigenetics, there's input from your DNA. I think there's like an environmental omics as well, like your digital signatures from your wearables. And so, this is all kind of harmonized into a roll up that, I don't think you would ever look at and say, okay, well, that's the end. It's kind of like the beginning in terms of, well, maybe if I'm out on, a trip and I'm driving in my car, I want to certainly make sure that I get from A to B. So if there's a specific project that I'm working on, the vehicle is not my car now, but my body. If I'm an astronaut or if I'm an athlete or if I'm an entrepreneur or if I'm a dad, it's like, how much strain am I putting on the system? And am I going to be able to get from A to B? If I go out into the space station, am I going to be able to get back? I should probably, understand where this, metric of, longevity or health span or lifespan, whatever we're calling it, is, so that I guess I can pack my bag accordingly or fuel up appropriately or bring the right experts into the table. And so, as I kind of talk around, what it is that I think we're sitting on is as complex as it is, we're moving to this simplicity on the other side of complexity, which is, something like we all have limited time here. And, to the extent that you want to make the most of the time that you have, certainly, I think it is important to know at a ballpark, how much time we have left. And not that the age clocks are like telling you the countdown. I can't remember what that sci-fi movie is, but they're wearing the watches and they have like literally limit like minutes down to like, here's how much life I have. But certainly we live differently when we know that our time here is limited, and at least in the physical world. So, you're obviously a user of the product. And what I'd be really interested to know is, now I know the science is available on the site, but it might be worthwhile just to kind of, chat through, how you think about the models, how you came to them, and, what are some of your early adopters starting to see specifically, like what kind of behavior changes do you notice? Who are your customers? Who's really interested in using this? Because it's not just direct to consumer, it's like entire organizations. I think about this as somebody who, well, if I think about my family, I'm like, hey, how are the age clocks looking at, like, for my family, from my my father to my daughter and everybody in between, right? And how do we get them aware and intentional about their biology, because it is a gift. But then you can think about, organizations like insurance providers, like life insurance. You would think that once you have a customer who's purchased life insurance, it's in your interest to keep them alive, right? So it's like, how do we give them everything that they need to, maximize their health span? And and you can see this as being something that maybe countries aspire to measure, right? Instead of GDP, hey, what, right? Like, what's our, health span measure, as in chronological versus biological age ratio? Because you, as an engineer, you're probably a systems thinker, and is people are funny is once they know the levers of the system and how we define performance, it's like, oh, we start to kind of act in the system to achieve that outcome. And so that may be, kind of a philosophical thread that we can pull on, certainly in terms of getting an entire country behind maximizing our lifespan. But let's start with like N of one. Like, what was the moment when you were interfacing with a user or customer? Maybe it was even yourself, where you're like, wow, okay, I see how this is changing somebody's life for the better.
Yeah. Multiple points, Jamie. So let me start by saying this, that it's important to measure, right? Only when you start measuring, then you know that where you are, you have a baseline, then you have a plan, and then you are growing, right? For anything, right? Whether it is your education, your intelligence, you need to have a sense of measure, right? That tells you where you are and where you want to go. We enable that, right? So that, for me and personally as well, was the first thing, that okay, right? So I did a baseline and I realized this is where I am, and then I put myself on an improvement journey, and then I keep doing this. So the second thing which I would say is, try and be consistent with one aging clock, right? Because what you also want to understand is the pace of aging, right? Different models, these are all statistical models. Different models will have different outcomes, and it's not the fact that you are biologically older or younger by so many years that should be your immediate concern, because it would vary depending upon which clock, which company you are interacting with. But what is more significant is two things. One, you do understand whether you are biologically younger or older, implying your biological age ideally should be less than equal to your chronological age. That should be the goal across age groups, right? So that goal shouldn't change whether you're 20 or you're 40 or you're 60. And the second thing is that when you do it again after 6 months, a year and a half, whenever you, depending upon your level of interest, what happened to that metric? You aged by a year. Did your biological age also change by a year, or did it change by 15 months, or did it change by 9 months, right? So are you a slow ager or you are a fast ager? You ideally want to be a slow ager and live longer, right? So that should be the driver for anyone who is looking at longevity. Now, when I look at, and even when you talk about who is going to use this, right? And we have it on our website as well. And initially, when I used to speak with my investors, and they would ask, okay, what's your target customer? And all the investors in the world love to get a precise answer. Okay, my target customer is this and this age group, above 50, who are doing well and who are sort of going to longevity clinics and to target. It makes it very clear, very precise. But when I told my investors, well, my age group is everyone on this planet. My target customer is everyone on this planet. My target customers are employers, they are providers, these are physicians, they are consumer health companies, they are insurance companies. They're like, that can't be, right? How can you think of creating a product which will serve all these industries, which will serve all the genders and all the demography? But that's exactly what this is. When you're looking at preventive health and you're looking at application of preventive health, it is across the board. And it took me a little while, but then we proved it. We proved it by having customers who are consumer health companies, having customers who are hospitals, having longevity physicians working with us, having employees working with us. So each one of those industry segment that I had carved out in my business plan, we came to realize. Then now if you extend that further, and you imagine, and I don't think we are too far away from that world where you have biological age being used across the board by, let's say, all the employers and all the organizations. And then suddenly cities and governments are measuring that, and you're publishing metrics that, hey, this is the world's happiest country. And we know we have that list that comes out every year. But along that, you have another list which says this is the world's healthiest country. Because here you have the maximum delta or the least delta where people have biological age, which is lower than their chronological age across age groups. And then suddenly you realize that, okay, using this metric, I can understand which cities I want to live in, which cities are great to live, what are places that are really sustaining life the best.
Yeah. Okay. When I think about, let's pick an age clock. So we're definitely aligned on that as a goal, right? Okay, your biological age, is it, ideally the same or less than your chronological age? That's what we're shooting for. Let's talk a little bit about, what are some of the models that are gaining the most interest? Because you have blood, you have microbiome, you have like methylation changes, epigenetic changes, you have your kind of your DNA score. So like, do you always keep those things together as a composite score? Do you break them out one by one to, consider interventions? And actually before you answer, something else is like, people who are listening are probably like, what do you mean? Why would a baby care about an age clock? Right. And so like you think about something like an infant, why would you want an age? Well, okay. Well, really what you're saying is, so you take like a microbiome metric, for example, of a C-section baby, right? So, well, one of the indicators of a healthful gut microbiome with vitality, that is one that has a certain level of diversity. So call it, richness, evenness, and diversity. And so there are various indices that you can look at that will give you those metrics. And what we know is, well, if you're a C-section baby, you don't travel through the birth canal. And so you don't get colonized with the vaginal microbiome, which by the way, that's what the baby's gut microbiome looks like initially, is the vaginal microbiome. Then it looks like a skin microbiome because it's passed around with family, and then eventually, through diet and lifestyle and exposure, hopefully, God willing, there's a healthful gut microbiome that emerges, which everybody's is different, but there are certain first principles that are, conserved to, call this thing a so-called healthy gut microbiome. And so it might be, confusing or counterintuitive to say, oh, I'm an infant and actually I've been born, or at a month, it's like my gut microbiome looks like somebody who's been exposed to C. diff, because actually now I am, and I don't have the robustness of a microbiome. And actually it's, pretty critical. You're in a higher risk state across all kinds of different inflammation, chronic diseases. And so I mean, that was kind of where I went. It's like, well, how would you use an age clock for a baby? It's like, well, there's an instance of it, right? And then you can actually, because these are temporal analysis, it's not measuring once and done. You don't check the oil of your car once. You don't look at the dashboard to see where the gas is or your charge is once. It's, you're constantly checking based on the stress of the system, based on where you are, et cetera. And so, okay, so just with that kind of frame, I see kind of the edge case is like, oh, well, actually the youngest human on the planet right now could get value from this. And so when I think about how does this get implemented into, a health plan, as you say, so you mentioned different points of entry into the market. So whether that's hospitals, whether that's functional med docs, whether that's longevity clinics, whether that's health insurers, what is it that the providers really like in particular? Where do they see room for improvement? What are the the end users, like what's their experience with it? Because, at first you hear something like this and it sounds super sci-fi and it seems like super, complex. And, but I think these technologies are becoming much more readily available. So what is the interface like when people get access to their data, when providers get access to their data, and communities get access to their data?
Yeah. Before I answer that, let me touch upon what you said before, Jeremy, because you touched a point which is very personal, and I'm actually very passionate about the C-section and natural delivery, and we understand it's great for the child to be born, right? If it's a normal delivery. But even before, right? So if you ask the question, when does longevity start? Actually, longevity starts pre-conception. Like you want to now, obviously, if you're planning for it, and if you are able to, and you'd want to, it's such an important thing. You are bringing a life to this earth. Then you'd want to really test yourself and see that you are healthy, and your biological age is great, and it's ideally lower than your chronological age. Because if, for example, you are smoking and drinking, and now there is absolutely no debate about this, it's not that it's just not good for your health. It changes your DNA. And even if you've done and then you conceive the baby, then it affects the DNA of the baby as well. It might seem a bit of a burden. It might seem too much, and might not be for everyone. And we understand all of these. But if someone really wants to really plan and do this properly, they would like to think that, well, we should plan about longevity preconception. And then, into delivery, as an example that you gave. So I really like that you brought that point up. Now, to answer your question, let's take an example of a specific product. Let's talk about Blood Age from Deep Longevity. That's our most popular product. See, we have done a lot of work, and we worked really hard to think how we'll bring value, right? So when you're doing research, and you're looking at data, and you're getting all sorts of insights, it's very easy to get carried away. And that's where some of the product design comes into play, where you can think, I want to give all of this information to the end user. But then you have the paradox of choice. When you give too much of information, then it leads to inaction, because the person is not able to zero in. Okay, all this is good, but either it is overwhelming, or then people are just not able to sort of reconcile and digest. And imagine if you put a 40-page report in a person who has the time today to really understand what the report is all about, right? Finally, most people want to understand what is happening with their body, because without that, the motivation will not come. And then they need to understand, okay, now so what? You have told me what my biological age is, so what? So that's exactly what we do with our reports. We give the biological age, we give insights into health in terms of organ health scores, and then we come into recommendations. And our recommendations are, again, things that people understand. It is about mostly around lifestyle. It's about diet. It's about exercise. It's about a few lifestyle changes, and about supplements, where the model determines that certain supplements are necessary. And that's what we deliver. So it's really simple. It's really elegant. The beauty is when the end user, the patient, the people like who are not very tuned to healthcare, even when they look at the report, they understand it. Right? Our core philosophy with building all our products is explainable AI. Even though everything is done being using AI, when the person for whom the product is made gets the product, he can understand it and read it like his English, and read it and understand without sort of having knowledge about medicine or health to a large extent. So they understand, this is my health, these are some of the significant areas. And then we try to answer the so what question. That, okay, we have highlighted certain concerns, we have highlighted certain areas of improvement. What do you do about that? This is how you go about having a balanced meal. That's pretty simple. This is how about you go about doing 140, 150 minutes of exercise in a week. These are some of the lifestyle changes you can do. And a lot of things are, okay, yeah, this is, I know this. It's not that people don't, but it's important to be reminded. It's important to be reminded that, hey, take hydration seriously. Make sure you get enough sleep. And then if needed, have certain supplements. Almost half the population on this planet is deficient in micronutrients. It is important. That's how things are right now. So it's important to supplement accordingly. Do these things, you will see a significant jump in your health. But the same thing, when it goes into the hand of the healthcare practitioner, even they see the value, because the healthcare practitioner sees the blood report, which is essentially a list of biomarkers and values, and they can understand more. But even them, and we interact with a lot of them on a daily basis, they have been trained to look at the biomarkers and say, okay, if things are looking within reference range, things are looking okay, I don't see any red flags, then that's absolutely fine, right? The conversation is easy when they see anomalies, when they see certain biomarkers that are high, then they can talk about prescription, or they can talk about what needs to be done to the patient, or to the client. The discussion is more complex when you have a healthy 32-year-old who's coming, when you look at the blood biomarkers, everything is looking great. But if you look at the biological age is older, because the concept of optimizing biomarkers, the concept of arriving at optimum level for your markers is really new, and that has come in with these with the, and it's recent. It has come in with all these discussions around longevity, and that is what we bring to the fore. We are saying we can see that everything is good, but everything is not optimal. So even though everything is good, there is significant scope for improvement for this apparently looking, healthy youth, but there is still so much that the person can do. And that is where the doctors are delighted that, okay, yes, I now have more insight, better understanding about the health of my patient, and I can really help my patient get on that journey of longevity.
Yeah, I keep coming back to the car analogy. It's a bad analogy because we're not machines, but I use it just because most people understand, right? And so I guess my point is I check the gas gauge more diligently, and I pay much more close attention, to the different cautionary lights, let's say. Now that I have a daughter, for example, it's like, oh, the tank is, I got half a tank of gas, and I'm like about to go home, and the end of the day, and I know there's enough gas for my wife to use the car with our daughter to go out, but I'm like, well, gas station's right there. I mean, why would I not keep it on full, right? And then you kind of get into the habit of always doing the good preparatory proactive thing, because I think we humans, well, life forms in general, are really good at survival, and we'll certainly run away from pain and run towards less likely to run, I guess, towards stimulus, but depends what kind of stimulus, I suppose, that is. And I guess my point is having something to, so this comes back to the point that you raised before when you talk to your investors. Like, well, this is for everybody. It's like, okay, but what do you mean? Because as soon as I start to say, well, okay, Jeremy, the dad, this is why it's important that he would check in with his own clock, because he has certain obligations to his family. Let's say Tom Brady, the athlete, he wants, well, let's just say Tom Brady 2.0. It's like the next generations of Tom Brady. Tom Brady, let's say he didn't get on his longevity kick until he was maybe 30, 35. What if he started when he was 20? What if his parents started, before, in terms of their healthy practice and preconception? Now, I think there's obviously a certain amount of spontaneity that we want to see in life. And so, like, an objection sometimes that, I used to have against myself, and I field against others as well. You're so structured and rigid with how you run, your kind of health and wellness. And, it kind of seems like you're trying to control everything. It's like, no. It's actually the opposite. It actually puts you in a position to handle more chaos, and to actually be a better leader, and to do well under pressure if you've taken care of these first things first offline. And so, yeah, just being able to have a healthcare professional point to you, like, it's like, oh, hey, you don't even know how to check the gas. Like, let me do that for you. And eventually, I suppose this could become something that's more autonomous. It is something, that's part of like a health station in our homes, for example. And there's telemedicine components as well. I don't know that we're going to completely do without our experts, but it is interesting to be able to join this, create kind of greater conversation. And I bring this up only because, serendipitously, I've been thinking a lot about this. And if I'm way off, feel free to steer me clear. But there's this, whole notion of it's a discipline called biosemiotics, right? And so what is biosemiotics? It's this idea of, well, it's an interdisciplinary field that explores the production, action, and interpretation of signs and codes in biological systems. Combines principles from biology, semiotics. Semiotics is a study of signs and meaning, philosophy, and linguistics to investigate how life communicates and processes information, right? And so when I start to hear you talk about age clocks, I think signs in biology are things like, well, DNA, hormones, neurotransmitters, and other molecules that function as a sign or signals. And again, cellular responses, so reacting to stress or nutrients. are interpreted in meaningful interactions in this, semiotic system. And it's a really kind of far out way of thinking. The atheists wouldn't like it at all, because it does kind of presuppose this notion of preordained divinity, or, that evolution has an end point. But you don't necessarily have to think about it that way. But what we're learning is there is a language to be learned. And right now, maybe 0.0000001% of people in the world understand this. And, more and more it's becoming more accessible. But the question is, I suppose, like, how do you even really know that it's true, right? From the, because say with AI, we see all these models, like, oh, this is so complicated. Like, now I know the answer to that. The answer to that is simply is to the people who use this information, are they more helpful by these, standard and universally accepted metrics? So I think it is easy to measure in the same way that I don't know how my GPS works down to the detail, but I seem to get to where I want to go when I program in that location. So I guess there's two kind of questions here that I think have emerged from this. Is the nature, seems to me the nature of the conversation that health practitioners now can have because of models such as these with their patients seems to be more intimate, more personalized, more precise, down to the recommendation. I guess that's number one. And I guess number two is, when does this become scalable, and what's the version that a 4-year-old could understand, right? But at the end of the day, I know that it's based on my biology. So maybe if we could talk a little bit about maybe your vision as to where the company is today and where you envision it going. So you're working with longevity docs, you're working potentially with insurance providers, you're working with other B2B organizations, potentially other B2B2C organizations. And, you've got these proprietary models. Each organization, well, in theory, I think becomes a partner to evolve those models with you, because they've got all this new insight, this new data. So yeah, it seems to me like there's this, incredible opportunity, especially if we're fueled by something like, hey, our goal at Deep Longevity, and again, I'm putting words in your mouth, so feel free to decline. It's like, hey, our goal is to, maximize the biological to chronological age ratios across the world. And if we do that, here are the kinds of things that we could, see in society: reduce poverty, more creativity, more peace, harmony, et cetera, abundance, right? So that's a big vision. And I guess the question is assuming that's where you want to go, or somewhere like that, well, I'd be interested to know what your vision is, and then, where you are on that milestone map.
Yeah, a great question. I think my vision is really simple. I see our aging clocks being used all over the world, right? All regions, all countries, millions and hundreds of millions of people using our aging clocks. And then they will evolve. They will also, there'll be more products, and there'll be more information that we will convey, right? And I think what the vision, that the picture that you outlined would be realized in that process, right? So if I have to now give an analogy to summarize this, it's like, being a producer of, let's say, crude oil. And I know talking about oil is not great, and it should be, let's say, green energy in some form. But my whole focus is, I am going to produce crude oil and try to deliver it as cheap as possible, and it will be used to power all the innovations in the world, and all the supercomputers and all the cars, and people will go there, and people will save lives because they are able to go there, and people will meet and collaborate. And all this is happening because I'm providing the energy that is fueling the world. So the way we see ourselves is, we are the tools for innovation. Once we put it out there, and once people see this, then they will manifest in their own set of use cases. They will manifest in their own ways. We bring people together. We talked about biological age as a quotient that is being published. See, a small data pool, but what we have observed in our organization is, we use the Mind Age a lot. I really like it because we have a unique offering in terms of preventive mental health. And it's really easy to use. And we have noticed over the years certain patterns where, if we pick up that in certain units, in certain business units, in the company there are low scores, invariably it is followed up with either people going on leave or sick breaks, and so we know, and we have shown this through our research as well, that poor psychological state really affects your health. It affects it adversely even more than smoking does, and we published that research, which was quite striking. So when these measurements become systemic, and when people are doing it regularly, and then when people are combining it, you mentioned in terms of composite scores earlier, we think this can play a big role in clinical trials. The challenge is today the FDA doesn't recognize aging as a disease. Most of the regulatory agencies don't. So anything that is trying to sort of quantify that also then becomes a measure which is not relevant for the regulatory authority. But I have had a few discussions with licenses companies, and what I tell them is, why don't you measure and keep it anyway, right? You have already done all the work, you have the blood work, you have all the data, you get the biological age, and you keep it, and you see what conclusions you're drawing from them. You may not use it in your submissions finally, you may keep it aside, right? It not be accepted, so you're not going to use it in your submissions, and that's fine. But it will tell you whether this can be a guiding light for your internal endeavors, right? If you know early on and your biological age is telling you that it is helping with whatever therapy, whatever procedure you are innovating, then you can carry on. And if it doesn't, then you can try and do something else. Will it be, and these are some of the hypotheses I really like to prove working with the industry, will it be a significant signal in terms of how, for example, trials are proceeding? So yes, no, we don't, sort of try to imagine how the use cases would finally manifest in terms of the good it will do. We are very clear, and we have seen that from all the feedback that we have got from our own experiments. It's very useful, and when you build something which is very very useful, which is insightful, which is innovative, and you put it out there and give it to the hands of people who are really smart and want to do something, it finds a way to get imbued in everything else that is happening in the field of healthcare.
Yeah, interesting to hear. You speak of aging as a disease. I mean, the folks at the Buck Institute, I think, are really big into that. There's a lot of great research happening there, and and even this, I remember actually coming across this idea. I think it's Ames is the researcher's name. I can't remember his first name. Ames, and he talked about this phenomenon of micronutrient triage, right? So this idea that, if you're deficient in, calcium, for example, you still need calcium to contract your muscles. And guess what? There's a pretty good supply of calcium in your bones. So I'm going to borrow it from there because, muscle contraction is a, higher priority than, the structural aspect. And anyway, the point is there's, micronutrient leaching happening all day long. Well, I mean, you just look at refined foods that don't have the B vitamins necessarily to do the glycolysis reaction. And so, guess what? You're stealing those things from all kinds of, critical aspects of our metabolism, right? So growth and cellular division and cognition. And so, yeah, it literally is this kind of scavenging that's going on for the immediacy of, survival in the moment, but at the sacrifice of the future in a reckless way, because you're not even doing it strategically. You maybe don't even realize the bad habits, the bad foods, the bad behaviors, etc. So I think that there's this notion that we're living in this environment that we've created for ourselves that is, suboptimal for our biology. Now, I'm not advocating for a shift into the paleo or whatever, and we should be hunter gatherers, et cetera. But there is some kind of harmonizing that needs to happen and take place. And, and again, you read into, because I grew up exposed to, scripture. And if you look at the Old Testament, it's people are living 600 and 700 and 800. Now, I don't necessarily take that literally, but some people do. Maybe it's true. Were there instances of people who were living 10 times longer than we are now? Because you certainly, on the other end of this, and you're hearing a lot of folks these don't die initiatives because the technology is coming that you may be able to live to 200, 300, 400. Like, I mean, so, but when you frame aging as a disease, it's like, oh yeah, no, actually our natural lifespan is 1,000 years. And, right now we're operating on this strategy of like kind of bang or bust in population growth because we're under this, kind of paradigm or exposure of extreme stress, right? So it's like kind of a numbers game. And so we're kind of jumping over into the philosophical here. Feel free to decline the question, but it's hard to not ask it because, if we properly and concisely and exhaustively define the pathology of aging, how long do we live? Do we want to live in this biological form forever? So I have a sense that you've thought about these questions. That's why I bring it up. So this is kind of stepping outside of the business model and insofar as, okay, now we've eradicated aging as a disease. Now, so what? Now what?
Yeah, a lot actually, and like when you mentioned those myths and stories from the scriptures, I think that's across religions. So I'm a Hindu, and if you follow the myths that we have heard and we have read in our scriptures, you would hear there are teachers and priests, and we would call them rishis, who will go on meditation, and there'll be an anthill on top of them, and they're there for hundreds of years. You will find that there is a teacher who has taught the king, and the king has passed away, and then has taught his son, and the son has passed away and has taught his son. So he has been teaching for three generations, and the kings have passed away, but the teacher is still there. So you could try and do the math that, okay, so did he live for what, 300 years, and what was going on? No, so that's interesting. And at the beginning of our discussion, I did say that it's important to live life with a purpose. That helps, and actually that helps from a longevity standpoint as well. I don't necessarily think about, actually, before that. So I think that the realistic goal with all the research and the work that we are doing is human beings should be able to live till 120 years. And there's some debates with and controversies with the blue zone stories as well. But even keeping aside that, if you know somebody, you go to a village in India and somebody will know somebody, there's a grandfather who has lived for 100 years and is still alive and is there. And these are not like very isolated incidents as well. And some of them may not have all recorded data, but they have been there, and people know they're really old and they're fine and they're healthy. So yes, I think it's a matter of time. It is going to be solved. Probably we'll see it in our generations amongst all the practitioners who are there around. But I think it is important then to start reflecting towards what, right? And it's for every individual. So if I have to sort of reflect, I can think of one example. And many years back, I've lived in Japan, and I find this just a fascinating country, a fascinating culture. And you'll find a lot of people who are aging, but what you see is that they're very active and they want to contribute. So I'll give this particular instance. It was quite late. I think we we're coming back from dinner, and there was some construction going on the street, and there was this must be 80 plus old gentleman who was standing there in front of my apartment, and he was just apologizing for the work which is disrupting my flow, and I have to take a detour, and maybe a 1 minute detour. So he apologized for that and showed me the way I had to walk. I could just, like, I could understand. And when I discussed with my colleagues in Japan the next day, they said, yeah, these are volunteers who come out, and they don't ask for any pay or anything, and this is their way of doing something and being helpful and being active. So I think it is for every person, whether it is something you're looking at in terms of attachment or detachment, you want to consume or create. And that is, I think that perspective is very important. Personally, I believe that we are creating a world for our children. I have a son. He's going to be 13 next month, but his I think he has managed to keep all his innocence. He likes to watch Three Stooges and Tom and Jerry even now. And I think I would like him to live a purposeful life. And I think if you're led by a decision, led by a thought that we are doing things for our children and theirs, for future generations, that should drive goodness in almost all our actions and decisions.
Wow, you preemptively answered those three questions. Remember that I said that I was going to ask you is like if yeah, if there was one thing that people would have to that you would want to convey, and I don't think it becomes more poetic than that. And then who has to hear it? And well, it's clearly everybody. But it sounds to me like, live a long, full life to your maximum health span for the benefit of the future generation. I think it's something like, plant the acorns to the trees you'll never see so that somebody can sit in the shade, right? And that's a beautiful message. And certainly everybody needs to hear that, and that abundance is potentially available to us all. Okay. So, and then the third question is, if you could recommend one guest as the next nomination for me to host on the DNA of Things, who might that be?
Yeah, I think you really enjoy speaking with Alex Zavarankov. He's the CEO of In Silico Medicine. Alex is a dynamic leader. He has been talking about longevity before most people. He's simply fantastic. He's got so much energy. And one thing, since I did mention Alex, I would like to mention about him that is really unique that I found in him is he truly believes in helping people and creating success around him. So you see like so many people who are associated with Alex, he sort of goes above and beyond to make them successful, which is a very unique and rare trait that you see in leaders today. So I really recommend Alex being on this show.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'll try to track him down and extend him the invitation as per your recommendation. Deep, in terms of how people can find you, what's the best way for them to connect? So people who might be reaching out, well, I think they're going to be just people generally probably curious for this service for themselves, but there's also potential B2B partners, providers, investors, et cetera. So how do people find you? What's the best way to contact Deep?
Yeah, our website, deeplongevity.com, we keep it very updated. Everything that we do, we post it there. There are product videos, information about our science, the blogs, all our publications are there. Someone just needs to fill up the contact us form, add 2 lines in terms of what the context is. Our team will reach out, we'll set up meetings with them, we'll understand what's on their mind, and we love to sort of collaborate and partner with everyone out there.
Amazing. Okay, I'll put that information in the show notes. But I certainly have a whole bunch of questions that I want to circle back with you on after I've had some chance to review my own deep scores, if you will. So maybe that'll be a follow-up episode where we can kind of talk more specifically about the product and implementation strategy, because I know there's a lot of kind of do-it-yourselfers out there who are listening to this who are really interested in giving everything they can in this life. So, well, until that next time, let me just say thank you, Deep. It was an absolute pleasure having you, and thank you for everything that you are doing and that you will do.
Thank you so much for having me, Jeremy. I really enjoyed speaking with you, and definitely we look forward to the next one as well.
All right, Deep Nayak's vision is clear: to put the power of preventative health in the hands of everyone. By creating a shareable, scalable platform, he is planting the seeds of a future where biological age is as common a metric as our weight or our height. The responsibility he leaves us with is profound. Now that we have the tools to measure our health span, what will we do with this knowledge? The vision of a healthier world is here. The code has been written. Now it is up to us as individuals, practitioners, and communities to help bring it to life and build a future worthy of the extra time we may be given.